Here's a question for all parents. What would you do if you saw a child playing with a gun and found gunpowder on his or her hands? What would you do? Would you confront them? Would you be shocked or say, no, don't do that? It's exactly what happened today in Ohio. Just today, an Ohio man was charged after a child shot a gun inside a home, and a chilling incident that was caught on video. We'll show you the video in just a minute. Columbus City Attorney Zach Clayton announced the charges today against Matthew Rivera's, making it the first case following the city's recently passed safe storage ordinance. Clayton's office released a video obtained from inside Rivera's home that shows the January 27th incident that happened on January 27th. In the footage, the child finds a loaded firearm in a couch cushion and discharges it, immediately pointing at his face. At least one other child was in the room at the time. Don't appear everybody was injured. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of negligent storage of a firearm and 1 count of child endangerment. It's unclear about the relationship. Here is the video that you're about to see in a minute, but before we do, I need to warn you. Some of this video you're about to see is clearly inappropriate for young viewers. So I want to warn you again, this video is very disturbing. If you have small children, this is not a video for them to watch. But as parents, you need to watch the story you're about to see, because this video you're about to see can be the first ever case of child endangerment. Viewer discretion is advised. Take a look. Well, that was cut. So, now here's some common sense for you. Common sense alert. Are you kidding me? First of all, did they hide it? No, they didn't. Did they hide it? No, they didn't. Did they keep it in a safe place? No, they didn't. So where's the common sense in all this? Common sense would tell you, lock it in the safe. Lock it somewhere. Don't be hiding it under the pillow, underneath your desk, in your purse, on yourself. Because I'm about to be an uncle pretty soon, and I can tell you, after watching that footage right there, I need to tell you that this is and as almost being a parent, let me tell you, it was very horrific for me to watch. And I'm pretty sure you guys are in danger too. Let's look at the comments from this video. See that if it violates any law. So I commented 6 hours ago, common sense after watching that. What amazes me most is that the fact that negligent adults, parents yell at the kids when they are to blame not the kids. Number one, you should leave a firearm unsecured, period, no matter the circumstances, unless you intend on killing it. It's called negligence. It gets people killed. That's from Roga85 from 8 hours ago. It's like the man is trying to blame the kid for his own negligence. He should be castrated and not allowed to have a gun again. I'm glad no one got hurt. Parents should be charged with reckless endangerment. This is wrong on so many levels. Bad parents. Bad parents. He replied saying, I'm sure they'll find someone else illegal that's in the household. There we go. Let this be a lesson. If you must leave a gun out on a secure location, make sure to keep the safety on, and make sure not to leave it anywhere unattended, especially around children. Correction, there is never a right time to have a firearm out of a secure location unless you're intending on using it, safety or not. If a 2-year-old can figure out how to use it. Let's blame the kids yelling them instead. So did the parents go to jail this time? They did. Yes, let's blame the gun manufacturer, not the child's parents or guardians. Personal responsibility in America is dead. From Bobby Moss. Read the comments. Everyone is saying this is the fault of the gun laws. When in reality, these people didn't even follow the rules. You were supposed to have your weapon locked up if the children were in the household. Exactly. But let's look at that. Let's look at that law. Actually, we're going to take a break here. When we come back, we're going to look into that law that happened when the kids got it, before this incident happened. And then later on, insect repellents. We're going to tell you what you can do if you ever come in contact with DEET, which is part of insect repellents. Stay with us. 2 months ago, the city passed an ordinance in Ohio that voted unanimously Wednesday to pass 2 gun laws addressing the safe storage and possession of firearms. The council must pass an ordinance requiring the safe storage of guns, especially around children. Guns should be in a safe, lockbox, or another device that prevents them from being used or accessed. Any parents or guardians who do not properly store the child's guns and create a substantial risk to the health and safety of the child can be charged with a first-degree misdemeanor. The ordinance specifically mentions the October 2022 death of a 3-year-old who was shot and killed by his 6-year-old brother. Police said the children's father left a loaded gun in an easy accessible location for the children. The father was charged with involuntary manslaughter and endangering children. The ordinance also makes possessing a firearm illegal for someone convicted of a domestic violence or subject to a court order restraining them from harassing, stalking, or threatening with an intimate partner. Anyone who violates the law will face a misdemeanor punishable by up to 1 year in jail. The Buckeye Firearms Association released a statement after the city's initial announcement vowing to fight the proposals. I mean, why fight the proposals here? I mean, throwing them in jail for a year, yes. That's the common sense here. We need to teach parents a lesson. I mean, parenting classes could be good for people who are on probation. If it's the first time, you shouldn't be throwing them in jail. You put them on probation. What you do is you put them on probation. That'll teach them. I mean, if I left an unsecured firearm somewhere, in Texas, and the child found it, would I be in danger? Probably not. But what strikes me most after seeing that video clip, let me tell you, got me over the edge. Where's the common sense in all this? Common sense would tell you to lock it in the safe. Look at the labels. Keep out of reach of children. Those guns should have warnings. I mean, last season we did a special called Guns in America, Day in the Life. Well, all this week, we're going to be looking at parents and guns. Where's the common sense? And this right here is the start of the week here. All today and through Saturday, we're going to be focusing on stuff like this. Well, not personally like this, but we're going to be reteaching gun safety as opposed to this. So remember this from Eddie Eagle. If your child sees a gun, stop, don't touch. Sorry about that. Stop. don't touch, leave the area, and go tell an adult. The child won't be punished, and together you guys come up with a plan. And therefore, after watching this clip, I feel horrified. Worst parents ever, says one person. Unbelievable. Poor kids. Small one in the house was a dog. Father back son don't need guns. Parents still don't listen. Poor kids and poor dogs live in that dangerous chaos. Mommy and Daddy of the Year. As also be honest, we have lots of these in America. I mean, who was the one that picked up the gun? We probably won't know. We don't know. Let's look at the clip again closer, but without the sound. So you can see right here, this person probably doesn't have the gun, but this person right here probably did have the gun. There were like two kids. And so they run. There's 3 adults present. And all 3 people are locked up in a corner. So it's unclear who had the gun. Probably these 2 kids. Probably one of the 2. We probably don't know. But whoever had the gun, I mean, think about it. Let's go back to when hold on a second. You remember years ago, probably a year or 2 ago, we focused on a shootout? Let me see if I can find it. I probably can't find it, but there was a shootout. Let me see if I can find it. Oh. I don't know. If you guys remember what happened where teens got shot, let me know. I'll try to find it, but we still got a lot to move on. Coming up next, do you have mosquito repellent? What if someone you know died from too much DEET, which is the main thing in these mosquito repellents? Chris Wallace on these insect repellents. Stay with us. Summer's coming up, and that means insect repellent time. Here's the question for you. What if you sprayed insect repellent on yourself, and then as a person alive, you realize that he was poisoned or died because of too much insect repellent? It's exactly what happened in the story you're about to see. Tonight, some details into a chemical in these repellents called DEET. What is it? It's a thing. It's a thing that was used back during the war. As Chris Wallace tells us, something you may want to avoid. Here's Chris Wallace.
Oh boy, you guys better be ready, because here it goes. Get him! Woo!
These are the last moments of Tim Christensen's life. He celebrated last 4th of July in Arlington, Nebraska, like a lot of Americans. A family outing with his wife and 18-month-old daughter. Then some fireworks. Tim sprayed himself that day with an insect repellent to keep the bugs away. His wife Joby remembers.
He'd go ahead and spray it on his hands and rub it on his face, and he had a crew cut, so he'd apply it to his scalp.
10 minutes after he put on repellent for the second time that day, the 26-year-old suddenly had trouble breathing.
And I turned and looked at him, and he had thrown his head back, and his body, it gets kind of stiff.
What do you think was going on?
I wasn't sure, but his brother was just finishing up paramedic training. And when Tommy called for his medic bag and said they had
Within a half hour of these pictures, Christensen was rushed to the hospital without a pulse. He'd had a seizure, which caused him to choke to death on his food.
Ms. Christensen, what killed your husband?
the chemical deed that is used in rubber pellets.
And that's what the coroner found, listing the cause of death as toxicity to DEET that resulted in a seizure. Insect repellents are a $50 million a year industry, and 97% of all repellents, including such best-selling brands as Off, Cutter, and Repel, contain a little-known chemical called DEET. But there is growing concern among some experts that DEET can cause serious health problems, especially in children. The military developed DEET with the U.S. Department of Agriculture in the early 50s to protect soldiers against insects. DEET doesn't kill insects, it repels them. The problem is, it can also be absorbed through the skin or inhaled, which some studies have shown can affect the nervous system.
This product has gone through a battery of tests and has been tested in the real world.
Ralph Engel is president of the Chemical Specialties Manufacturers Association, which represents the makers of insect repellents.
How safe is DEET?
Very safe. There are 200 million people in this country that use DEET safely and successfully annually.
Still, over the years, scattered reports of problems have surfaced. During the 70s and early 80s, 7 children suffered brain disorders after applications of DEET, including 3 who died. In the mid-80s, workers at the Everglades National Park suffered rashes, dizziness, and numbness of the lips after repeated exposure to DEET. But the battle over safety got going only after a recent outbreak of Lyme disease in the Northeast, when makers of insect repellents began marketing higher concentration DEET to protect against ticks that carry the disease. The concentration of DEET is listed on the product. For instance, 33% DEET means 1/3 of the solution is DEET.
He's not really the same child.
Nanette Harrison is talking about her son Elijah, who developed seizures in 1989 when he was 8. She says she sprayed him once a day for 2 days with 25% DEET. The next day he got sick. She's suing the manufacturer.
He started to drool. And when he started to drool, I saw his hand lift up claw-like. And he started shaking.
I mean, you're his mom. What'd you think?
My fear was that I was going to lose my son right there.
That was Elijah's first seizure. Since then, he's kept having them, sometimes 3 or 4 a month.
How did the other kids treat you?
They've said that I'm like an idiot because the way the seizures are.
It would appear that the patient's exposure to DEET was what caused their neurological problems at that time.
Dr. Stanley Oransky, head of a New York Poison Control Center, wrote a report on Elijah's case and 4 others. The first word many doctors got about the possible dangers of DEET. But Oransky says he still doesn't know why some people get sick, while most don't.
We don't know that it's the concentration. We don't know whether it's the time of exposure, whether it's the patient's own makeup that has something to do with it, whether it's the amount and whether it's dose-related, or whether there are other factors.
In the battle over DEET, the state government here in Albany, New York, has become ground zero. Health officials became so concerned about safety issues that they banned any products with concentrations of more than 30% DEET. But then the makers of insect repellents started fighting back.
We didn't think it was appropriate to ban the use of DEET at any concentration.
The chemical industry sued to overturn the 1992 ban, setting off a 3-year court battle.
Were you at all worried that if this ban went into effect in New York, it could spread to other states around the country?
Worry isn't perhaps the right word, but concern.
Those concerns deepened when last February New York's highest court upheld the ban, noting the state had relied on 44 scientific studies to conclude that possible detrimental side effects from the human use of high-concentration DEET products outweigh possible benefits. So the industry moved the battle over DEET from the courthouse to the State House, where George Pataki, a critic of government regulation, had just become governor.
DEET is big business.
New York Assemblyman Richard Brodsky is chairman of the Committee on Environmental Conservation. He says lobbyists for the chemical industry put on the pressure.
They were smart enough to go not to the public health officials, but right to the guy who was the regulatory reform guy for the Pataki administration.
He's talking about Bob King, a Pataki appointee charged with reducing government regulations. On February 17th, King met with industry lobbyists. On March 1st, he wrote this letter to state health officials, saying, "I would strongly urge you to re-examine the ban." On March 17th, the state health commissioner concluded the ban should be repealed, based on new scientific information.
The Pataki administration says it rescinded the ban based on new scientific information. Isn't that legitimate?
Well, that's a hoot, because what they had was the application of high concentration DEET to 4 people for a couple of hours in a study paid for by the chemical industry. They held that up as a reason to overturn 44 public health studies, and to do so on an emergency basis.
You seem to be suggesting that this was more a political decision than it was a public health decision.
Oh, I think it's clear. That was a 3-year process, and it was turned around in 3 weeks.
I felt the evidence just was not there.
Barbara De Buono is Pataki's new health commissioner, who approved repealing the ban. The governor's office wouldn't let us talk with regulatory reform director Bob King. But De Buono said politics had nothing to do with a quick turnaround.
I work pretty fast.
You're saying that you were the one in the state government who pushed for repealing the ban.
I'm the one who made the decision.
I asked you, were you the one who pushed for repealing the ban?
What I'm saying is I'm the one who made the decision.
And De Buono said she had good reason for overturning the ban, based on that new information that higher concentration DEET may be more effective in repelling ticks.
This is a company study.
That's
A
correct.
study done by an employee, a researcher.
That's correct. And I fully recognize some of the caveats and some of the limitations of that.
When we continued to press De Buono about whether there should be a limit on DEET, she ended the interview.
I think there is a need for careful, judicious, and very cautious use of this product
Commissioner, why?
at all levels.
Commissioner-
That's the point. I've got to close this because I
Commissioner, I got two
came
more
out of a
questions.
meeting. I came out of a meeting and I.
Why isn't even the U.S. military think that there
We
should
wanted to ask the commissioner why the U.S. military now supplies soldiers with no more than 33% DEET, and why the American Academy of Pediatrics says children under 5 should be given only 10% DEET. While De Buono wouldn't answer, the chemical manufacturers did, insisting there's no risk even from 100% DEET.
100% DEET can be used safely and effectively when it's used as directed.
by everyone?
By everyone.
Adults?
Adults,
Children?
children.
But don't tell that to the family of Faye Davis. Back in 1992, when Faye was 3, her mother Joanne says she sprayed her once a day for 5 days with a widely used repellent that she didn't realize contained 100% DEET. 2 days later, Faye had a seizure.
Her eyes rolled up in her head, her arms got all stiff.
What did you think?
I thought she was going to die.
Mrs. Davis, a registered nurse, revived her child with CPR. Faye's doctor pointed to DEET as a possible cause of her seizure.
That's a valid poison center.
If DEET is so dangerous, industry officials ask, then why have so few incidents been reported? They point to a study of calls made to poison control centers between 1985 and 89. Only 19 cases of serious reactions to DEET were reported. But critics say many cases go unreported because doctors don't make the connection to DEET.
Are you satisfied that you know about all the cases?
I believe that I've seen most of the cases. I can't tell you whether I've seen every one.
Have you ever heard of Tim Christensen?
No, I have not.
My mother and I both, we screamed, the bug spray. It had to be the bug spray because
Jovi Christensen and doctors blame a spray containing 52% DEET for the death of her husband. She's now suing. Roger Dilley, the emergency room doctor the night Christensen was brought in, says it was the family that led him to the cause.
Would it ever have occurred to you that insect repellent might be responsible?
Nope, never seen that before.
Did you report this case to poison control?
I doubt it. I really don't recall that offhand.
We checked. The doctor never reported it. In the last year, DEET has also been investigated as a possible cause of the mysterious ailments known as Gulf War Syndrome. A possible link was first uncovered by James Moss, an Agriculture Department researcher, who was looking for better ways to kill cockroaches.
DEET mixed with certain other chemicals is more toxic than it would normally be by itself.
Soldiers in the Gulf were exposed to 2 of those chemicals, as well as DEET. Moss found the combination made DEET up to 7 times more toxic.
Do you think that DEET played some role in some soldiers getting sick in the Gulf?
I think it's a strong possibility.
Remember, the USDA was familiar with DEET. It helped develop the repellent to protect soldiers. But when Moss told his bosses about his findings, he was surprised by their reaction.
I was told to stop the research and not talk about it outside of the lab.
Any reason given? Any justification?
Fear of adverse publicity, fear of lawsuits. My personal opinion is the fact that it was developed in that lab 40 years ago may have had something to do with it too.
A USDA spokesman says Moss was conducting unauthorized research. When his contract expired, he was let go. Since then, his work has been backed up by Duke University experiments on chickens, and the Pentagon will now conduct its own study. But the biggest question about DEET is not what happened in the Persian Gulf, but what to do with products you can buy in your drugstore. The instruction labels are approved by the Environmental Protection Agency, which says DEET is safe in all concentrations. But the labels don't tell consumers how often to apply it, where the children may be most at risk. And the agency has never tested the safety of DEET for itself. What you end up with then is a sharp difference of opinion about how insect repellents should be used.
I've got some 100% DEET here. You would have no problems putting this on yourself.
That's true.
You'd have no problems putting this on a child or a
My
grandchild.
child or grandchild, as long as I use it as directed.
Would I use it? I think I would use it, but again, on the clothing, not on the skin directly.
You wouldn't put it at all on your skin directly.
I prefer not. I would just be very careful in my utilization of the material, completely.
So you may be asking, should I buy insect repellent? Should I not buy insect repellent? The answer is no, but know the risks. I'm not trying to scare you. All I'm saying is, if you're going to buy insect repellent, you need to know the DEET levels. Children should have no more than 10% DEET, and us adults, over 10%. Know the risks. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns or questions, ask your doctor. Or if there's some leak in your body, talk to your doctor. And the doctor should report it to poison control. Now we don't know. Chris Wallace will be back with an investigation into these coffee makers back in the 1990s. Stay with us. Now a question. Do you own a coffee maker? Years ago, if you owned a coffee maker and tried to start it the day before, you may have realized some smoke coming out. That smoke indicated a fire, and you may be still asleep, and your kitchen may be burned. What if you realized that the maker didn't do anything about it? That's just what we're going to show you. We're going to show you what happens when a coffee maker burns. You're going to meet the victims who started their coffee makers and went to burn houses, and you'll hear what GE have to say. Here's Chris Wallace.
My stepdaughter came into the bathroom screaming, "The house is on fire, the house is on fire." It was an inferno. The chandelier in the foyer was cracking and coming down around my ears.
For Richard Klein and his family, Christmas Eve 1980 was a nightmare. Their St. Louis home was a showplace, once featured in a magazine layout, until a problem with a kitchen appliance turned it to rubble.
There we are, out on the lawn. It's Christmas Eve. We don't even have shoes on.
And Mr. Klein, what had caused this fire?
It was our GE automatic timer coffee pot.
The night before, the Kleins had set the timer on a coffee maker like this one to start brewing in the morning. Fire investigators would later say a malfunction in the coffee maker caused it to burst into flames. But General Electric fought that judgment in a bitter 6-year legal battle. The Klein's lawyer, Tony Bruning, says GE's attitude was arrogant.
They were almost offended by the fact that we would claim that their coffee maker was defective and that it had caused a fire.
Wasn't General Electric just acting the way that big corporations do and vigorously contesting a lawsuit?
At the time, that's what we thought. But we later learned that they'd had a lot of problems with this particular coffee maker.
Over the past 12 years, hundreds of people have had problems with GE coffee makers. Defective machines have burned down houses, caused serious injuries, even killed people. But GE, the company that claims it brings good things to life, for years denied responsibility, contesting claims against its coffee makers with all the resources a big corporation can muster. Experts say the coffee maker has two problems. The thermostat wears out after long use, making this 12-cent fuse the key safety device. The fuse is supposed to act like a circuit breaker, cutting off the machine when it overheats. But over the years, the fuses kept failing, causing coffee makers to burn up, especially the automatic timer models used while no one is watching. But in its court case with the Kleins, GE said none of this.
For years, they told us they never had any fires with this particular coffee maker. And the safety director on the last day of trial testified they had 40, that he would acknowledge.
In 1985, more than 4 years after the fire, a jury awarded the Kleins $600,000. GE appealed, and a year later lost again. Did General Electric express any concern for your family, or any sense of responsibility for its product?
Not once. Not once before the trial, not once during the trial, and not since the trial.
GE knew they had a problem with their coffee maker design as early as 1980.
Michael Fitz, a Seattle engineer, is an expert on safety defects in appliances. He's investigated dozens of cases, sometimes siding with GE and sometimes against.
The propensity for these coffee makers to fail is severe enough that it will cause a fire that can destroy your house at any time.
We asked Fitz to demonstrate what happens to a defective coffee maker. He bypassed the thermostat and fuse to simulate a typical failure.
Plug it in and wait.
1 minute.
We have smoke starting to appear at the back here. You can just see a whiff.
Yeah, you can see a little bit, and you can smell
hot plastic.
5 minutes. The coffee maker starts to smoke, forcing us to back away. The heating element is approaching 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The family's upstairs, in bed, probably still asleep, and this is what's happening on their kitchen counter.
A lot of consumers will smell the smoke, and they'll come in at this time and they will unplug it.
9 minutes. The heating plate is starting to melt. What temperature does aluminum start to melt?
It will melt at about 1200. You can see that the hot water generator is starting to sag down. You see how the carafe no longer sits back on there straight. It's now sagging down.
We move the coffee pot as a safety concern, in case it shattered. 10 minutes. Now we got flames. This is just 10 minutes.
Just 10 minutes.
This coffee maker has caught on fire. So now you're still asleep upstairs. Your kitchen is filling with smoke, with noxious fumes. You've got a coffee maker that's over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and now you got a fire. 14 minutes. Whoops.
And that's another sign. A lot of people have come in and found the coffee maker in this position.
What would have happened in someone's kitchen by this point?
Well, by this time the cabinets would be starting to burn.
paper towels. In a matter of minutes now, we're going to have conditions that will be rapidly impossible to put out by a homeowner.
15 minutes.
Now we'll have flames looking across the top of the ceiling. The smoke level in the house by now should be reaching the ceiling areas of perhaps most of the areas in the house in, say, a single-story residence. As you can see, the plastic burns as a liquid, and it's like pouring diesel fuel on your countertop and letting it burn.
At this point, 16 minutes in, you have a full-scale disaster on your hands, don't you?
By this time, we would have a fairly well-involved kitchen fire.
Let's put this thing out. This internal GE document shows that as early as 1981, the company estimated there would be 168 claims that year, and rated chances no one would be hurt at only 42%. By 1982, the coffee makers had caused so many fires, GE recalled 200,000 of them as potential hazards.
The company has received several hundred reports of overheating or fires.
Other manufacturers also had problems, over the past 10 years recalling more than 1 million coffee makers because of fire hazards. After GE's recall, the company made improvements in its models, but the fires continued. GE considered adding a second backup fuse, but didn't do it. Finally, in 1984, GE got out of the small appliance business, selling the division to Black & Decker, which added that second fuse. But by then, 9 million of the new GE coffee makers were already in people's homes. And GE didn't warn customers of the possible dangers.
When they wore out, they figured they were then thrown away and they were no longer a potential hazard.
But in the meantime, with these coffee makers in people's homes, they expected some of them to catch on fire.
That's correct.
Defective GE coffee makers have been blamed for fires that destroyed the Pasquarellas' home in Philadelphia in 1985, the Felton's house in Claremont, California the same year, and the Elliott's home in Katy, Texas in 1987. But of all the fires caused by GE coffee makers over the years, perhaps the most tragic happened at this house here in Salt Lake City in 1989. One night in April, John Clark set the timer on his coffee maker and then went to bed. In the house with him at the time were his wife, 4 young children, and a teenage friend of the family.
When I first saw the fire, it was centered right around the coffee maker. Flames were shooting out into the kitchen.
Clark woke up the next morning to a major fire.
By the time I ran upstairs, there were flames chasing up the stairs.
Clark rescued one child and jumped out a window, breaking his shoulder. His wife escaped with another child. But others weren't so fortunate. The Clark's 4-year-old son and that teenage friend died of smoke inhalation. And 6-year-old Lauren Clark was burned over 30% of her body. In the last 2 years, Lauren's undergone 10 operations and still has to wear a special bodysuit to minimize scarring. Although she faces years of rehabilitation and surgery, she says the worst is behind her.
It probably was when I was still in the hospital and I had to do like physical therapy like constantly.
The fires completely changed our life, our family's life, and it took our son away. It's of course been a terrible tragedy.
The Clarks filed a $25 million lawsuit against GE and Emerson Electric, the St. Louis company that made the defective fuses. The companies negotiated for 1.5 years, then finally settled before trial for an undisclosed amount of money. And as part of the settlement, the Clarks also demanded that GE recall its coffee makers.
The company obviously knew that there was a problem, and that they knew that that problem could cause fires that could kill people.
And what did they do about it?
They didn't warn us. That's for sure.
Both GE and Emerson Electric refused our request for interviews. But GE gave us this statement read by Senior Vice President Frank Doyle. He began by expressing GE's regret about the Clark fire.
Although GE accepted responsibility in that case and settled with the families involved, neither words nor money can ever compensate a family for the death or serious injury of a child.
But then GE defended its actions. First of all, stating that only a very small fraction of the 9 million coffee makers it sold caused accidents.
No electrical product used in the home is totally risk-free, but GE believed the risk of serious injury from this coffee maker was extremely remote.
But GE has now acknowledged the coffee makers have been blamed for 15 injuries and some 400 cases of scorching, melting, and fires. And back in 1987, GE successfully sued the fuse manufacturer Emerson Electric. A GE official testified his company had been disgusted with the reliability of the fuses as early as 1982. GE's other defense, that it acted as soon as it realized the danger.
When GE discovered after the Clark fire that there might be an increased risk in the older coffee makers still in use, it reported that fact to the Consumer Product Safety Commission.
GE reported to the government, but not right away. In fact, not until 16 months after the Clark fire. David Schmelzer oversees recalls for the CPSC.
GE reported to us in 1990.
After hundreds of fires, after several deaths.
And when they reported to us, they didn't tell us that the product created a substantial product hazard. They said it did not create a substantial product hazard.
A recall of the supposedly new and improved GE coffee makers was finally announced in March 1991, almost 2 years after the Clark fire. But that was too late to prevent still another tragedy. 5 months before the recall, a fire blamed on a GE coffee maker gutted this house in South Carolina. 78-year-old John Oots, a retired pharmacist, was badly burned. He died 2 weeks later.
It could have been avoided if they had done the recall earlier.
Wilma Theed is the victim's daughter.
It's a nightmare that we live every day. I can't get it out of my mind.
The thought that GE knew about it and did nothing.
Did nothing. I could still have my dad today if it hadn't happened. Because of them. It's just, put it out there and let the people buy it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. No big deal.
Even now, despite the recall, the danger remains. Consumers have only returned 70,000 coffee makers, of more than 1 million thought to still be in use. That's less than 7%. And we had no trouble finding the coffee makers still being sold at second-hand thrift stores. How dangerous do you think it is that there are still hundreds of thousands of these coffee makers out there in people's homes?
A fire will happen. There will be more.
I mean, you just say that flat out.
Period. There will be more.
The Consumer Product Safety Commission is investigating whether General Electric violated the rule which says you have to report product hazards to the federal government promptly. If you have a GE coffee maker that you think might be subject to the recall, or if you have any questions about it, call this toll-free number, 1-800-443-9000.
No need to throw common sense in there. It's just awful to watch. Lost a lot of fires. Coming up next, you're about to meet someone who called 911 but was mistaken to what happened. You'll see what happened. Stay with us. Imagine your life is in danger and your only call was 911. Now imagine being in confusion when you're 5 minutes away from the police station. Tonight, you're going to hear from the woman who says it happened to her. And hear what the police had to say. Here's Raquel Chavez.
Taylor Thorne lives on County Road 36 in Robstown. She tells us she started her day early Wednesday morning only to find 2 allegedly intoxicated men on her front yard.
I call 911 and I say, I have people trespassing on my property. I'm alone. I have my 5-year-old son with me. I need someone to come out here. And I waited and waited and waited.
She lives less than 5 minutes from the Robstown Police Department, but she says it took more than 20 minutes before someone showed up to check it out. But it wasn't Robstown PD.
The reason why Robstown didn't come is because I'm not in Robstown city limits, but I'm not in Corpus Christi city limits, so they had to send the sheriff, which took like 22 minutes to come, and had these guys had like malicious intent to harm me, like me and my son would be dead.
The two men ended up leaving before officials got there. The confusion over jurisdiction concerned Thorne because she called Metrocom dispatch and gave them a Robstown address. We reached out to Metrocom. They answer emergency calls for all of the county, which includes the Nueces County Sheriff's Office, CCPD, and county constables. Metrocom tells us after receiving the call, they determined the Nueces County Sheriff's Office had jurisdiction. Thorne tells us the slow response time put her safety at risk.
If Robstown didn't come, they didn't even know about it. 20 minutes is a long time in a situation like that.
Thorne plans on speaking with county commissioners to try to get city lines redrawn. She hopes this will allow nearby law enforcement to respond quicker to emergency calls. Reporting in Corpus Christi, Michaela Chavez, Chris 6 News.
Common sense alert. Where do we begin here? First of all, that jurisdiction, let's look at the map here. For our purposes, we're going to relook at the map as part of our common sense. Because if you live in Corpus, you probably are in the Nueces County jurisdiction, Flower Bluff. Same thing in Nueces County. If you live in CCISD, it's the same thing. So, let's look at the map. Because she says she was 5 minutes away from the police station. Wouldn't it be easier to just walk to the police station? Well, probably not. If your life is still in danger, that those people are still on the property. I'm not throwing the victim under the bus, but it's confusing how it is. So wait when the map pops up and we'll show you. Okay, here it is. You see, this is Robstown. Sorry. This right here, this is Robstown. This is County Road 33. That there is 5 minutes. But out of jurisdiction. This is the Sheriff's Department from Nueces County. Now that's out of jurisdiction if she were to call from Nueces County. They would have driven over there, but it's 5 minutes away. But like she said, stuff needs to be changed. And come up on Wednesday, we're going to be talking about those 911 calls that don't go reported in. Let's give you a sneak preview. When seconds count.
13-month-old Brooke Hauser is found floating face down in her backyard pool.
Here's a sneak preview.
911, what is your emergency?
When the 911 safety net breaks, everything can fall apart.
911, is this an emergency?
In Boca Raton, Florida, 14-month-old Brooke Hauser is found floating face down in her backyard pool.
All you can do is wait for the rescue. They'll be there real shortly.
But while the ambulance is on the way, the 911 dispatcher doesn't know how to give CPR instructions. The little girl suffers severe brain damage and later dies. In Kentucky, Lillian Coleman and 3 of her children die when their house catches fire. A dispatcher initially sends fire trucks miles away to the wrong town.
Unfortunately,
That's coming up tomorrow, and we'll be right back. Now here's something you'll see coming up on Friday.
Tonight, a warning to travelers. Danger lurks south of the border for unsuspecting American tourists. Mexico is in the midst of a massive crime wave. She was attacked in a taxi cab.
These people were holding knives. They were very panicked. They were like, don't, close your eyes, put your head down, don't move, don't move, don't move.
She was raped and murdered on a lonely Mexican beach. Why didn't anyone warn them? These men didn't even make it out of the airport safely.
How many times do you think you were beaten?
I'd say over 50 times.
Mexico, it's beautiful, it's close, and it can be intoxicating. But Elizabeth Vargas found danger for Americans south of the border.
That's on Friday. And that's Give Me a Break for this Tuesday going to Wednesday. We will see you again for Give Me a Break Wednesday. For everyone here at YouTube, good night.